My name is Gemma, and I will be your moderator today. Before we start, let's take a moment to ensure that everyone is ready and familiar with the webinar control panel. First, you should have a control panel on the right side of your screen. You may minimize this panel by clicking on the double arrow button in the upper left corner. You may expand the panel by clicking the same button. Take a moment to practice. Second, you have the ability to submit questions using the chat pane located near the bottom of the control panel. Throughout our presentation, we encourage you to interact with our speakers by typing in questions and comments using the questions pane. We will be answering questions live both during the event and after the presentation. We're recording today's session, and we will be making the link to the recording available 24 hours post-event via email. We also encourage you to forward a copy of today's webinar to any coworkers you feel might benefit from the information presented during this session. Without further ado, I would again like to thank you for attending today's webinar, and I will pass you over to our presenters for today's session.
Thanks, Gemma, and thanks everyone for joining today. My name is Dave Wells, and today we're going to be talking about mobile device management for education. Now, I'm a senior sales engineer here at Technology Distribution, and I work mainly with educational institutions and organizations across Australia in implementing BYOD policies and implementing mobile device management solutions. A little bit about us here at Technology. We were founded back in 1999, and we're the absolute software distributor in ANZ and Southeast Asia regions. We focus on security and management technologies with a strong focus in BYOD, wireless, and forensic spaces. So kind of diving into today's webinar and what we're going to talk about. The first thing we're going to talk about is an intro to, we're going to go through intro to Absolute Manage MDM, because that's what we're going to be focusing on today. I'm going to show you live how we do device enrollment, how we create smart policies, going through configuration profiles, how we add third-party applications, and how we can distribute those applications using Apple's volume purchase program. Last but not least, we'll talk about creating and applying actions to those same smart policies we created. And then at the end of the session, we'll go through a question and answer. And as you go through, if there's any questions that you have, just enter those in the chat pane, and we'll get to those either live or at the end of the session. All right. Diving into things in Absolute Manage. Now, historically, we think about the way things used to be. So we used to talk about managing the network perimeter, and we had a basic set of technical inputs. Our solutions were stable. We had Windows, which typically had a Windows administrator. We had a Mac, which typically had Mac administrations, and then we had some mobile devices, which were kind of focused around mobile, a single mobile device administrator. Now, going forward, and what we're seeing in the market now is we're coming up to managing data. It's not the network. We're managing the data that lives on those devices. We're managing, a fragmented technical network, so many different types of devices across the dynamic management market. Now, we call this, a single kind of swivel chair approach. So you've got someone who may be going to a Windows tool to manage Windows devices, someone who's going to a Mac tool or an OS X tool to manage OS X devices, and someone going to a mobile device tool to manage mobile devices. Swivel chair approach, it doesn't work for long. It doesn't last. It's not sustainable. So that's what we came up with Absolute Manage. Now, with Absolute Manage, you can, in one console, manage all of your Windows devices, your Mac devices, your iOS, your Android, and your Windows Phone devices. So that's Absolute Manage as a whole, and that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So kind of jumping into the demo, we'll go straight into the demo here, and I'll show you the Absolute Manage console. So I'll open this up. Now, by default, I look at the computers. This is my computer's window, but just to switch to mobiles, I just click on mobile devices. And now I'm looking at a list of all my mobile devices. So first and foremost, we want to talk about how we get devices into our MDM, how we enroll devices. Now I'll show you on here a web page. So this is a web page that users on your mobile devices can go to, and they simply enter their username, password, and domain, and you can pre-populate this for you and choose whether it's a company, or we can make that say school-owned device, or whether it's a personal device. And based on these two selections, a field will be populated in Absolute Manage that lets you specify, okay, apply a specific set of configuration policies to all of the school-owned devices, and apply a different set of configuration policies to the personal-owned devices. And to show you how this works, I'm going to open up my iPhone here and show you a live demo. So right now I'm looking at that same page, but on my iPhone. Now you can see I don't need to enter in the type of device. This system will automatically know, and I'm putting in my username, my password, and my domain, but we can populate that domain for you. Just remember when I click Login. Now I get presented with an employee mobile device agreement, and where Absolute Manage differs is depending on the choice of that school-owned or personal-owned device, you can be presented with two different types of mobile agreements. Now a user scrolls through, gets to the bottom, and says agree, so they agree. At that point, we can launch an email out to the school's administration to say, hey, this new user has enrolled, and they've accepted the end-user license agreements policies. So first and foremost, from a mobile device management tool, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to install our profile, our MDM enrollment profile. So I click Install here, and I click the Install Now button, and I'm entering my passcode. I install the profile, and what's happening, I've just enrolled my device into MDM, and now the MDM solution can control this particular device. Along with the details of the device, it's sent up a list of my Active Directory memberships. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find this device, I'm going to open it up, and we'll take a look at all the different types of details that it'll capture. So I grab the device name, the phone number of the device, the Wi-Fi network it's connected to as an example, the warranty, and as you can see this particular device is out of warranty, but if you had a device in warranty, it would give you the correct warranty end date and show whether that it was in warranty. And these are just basic, basic hardware details about this particular device. Now, as I go through a device, and I'll jump back to the screen, because I enrolled my device, I connected to it, and automatically I'm configuring Exchange Active Sync. So in my MDM, I have a configuration profile that says, okay, automatically create the Exchange Active Sync profile for this particular user. And at this point, I can enter in my password, and an email would automatically be set up for me. So along the same lines, we can be pushing Wi-Fi SSIDs. So a lot of best practice around configuration profiles for Wi-Fi is have a user enroll, go through the enrollment process on a guest network, and then push them out a Wi-Fi SSID profile for your production network, and they'll automatically be connected to that. I apologize for the rigid screen there, but it's one of those mobile type of applications. So diving in, I get a nice look and feel for my device that I just enrolled. And as I scroll through, I'll just show you the way this portal looks like. Now, in my Absolute Manage MDM, I've got a list of assignable items, and which we'll dive into in a second. In-house applications, so MDM can distribute your in-house applications for you. MDM can distribute any third-party applications, and that means any applications that are housed in the iTunes or Google Play Store. And configuration profiles. And configuration profiles are what we use to configure your iOS and Android devices. That could be anywhere from the Exchange Active Sync that I was just talking about to Wi-Fi to even restricting profiles, and we'll create a restricted profile in a second. Coming through, I've got media, so I can assign out individual files to specific devices, and these are distributed through what we call Absolute Safe. So as part of the enrollment process, Absolute Safe gets loaded onto a device, and at that point we can take any of these types of files and distribute them out to specific sets of devices. Last but not least, in assignable items, we have actions. Now actions, these are automated. They could be emails, SMSs, device freezes, and demote to roaming and demote to unmanaged device actions that you can trigger automatically on your devices, and we'll trigger an automated email in just a few minutes. Now, nuts and bolts, really, of Absolute Manage is policies, and we call these smart policies. Now, smart policies are dynamic groups of devices based around a specific set of criteria. More often than not, we see schools creating their smart policies based around student years. So what we'll do right now is we're going to create a smart policy based around school year, and we'll just use the example that they're in year 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click here and say Policies, New Smart Policy for Mobile Devices. And I'll create this school year 10 devices. So I'm just naming the smart group. And at this point, what I'm going to do now is specify that a mobile user is a specific member of. So mobile device user is member of, and this goes back to how you organize your Active Directory. So what I'll say is contains. So let's just say you've got an Active Directory where each of your student years are in security groups. So in my case, I'll say mobile device user is member of contains year 10. And so what this is going to do is it's going to specify, I can even just say 10. What this is going to do is it's going to specify that give me a list of devices that are only applicable being used by students in year 10. So I click OK. And if I had any students in year 10, what I would do is come through and, sorry about that. In my case, I do. I have in technology, my in technology iPad 3 is being used by someone in year 10, or supposedly someone in year 10. Now, at your school, you would see quite a longer list of devices in here. So remember, this is dynamic. And if I expand this school year 10, what I'll get is kind of the look and feel of those assignable actions. So I've got in-house applications, third-party applications, configuration profiles, media, and actions. So any of my configuration profiles that I take and create and move to year 10, school year 10 devices, would be applicable to all of my year 10 items. So let's go and take a look at configuration profiles. So from a configuration profile, as I mentioned before, is a way that you configure an iOS or an Android device. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to create a simple configuration profile that restricts iTunes and restricts Safari. So I'm going to do that as I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to say Configuration Profile, New Configuration Profile. And I get the option of what type of configuration profile I want to choose. I'm going to leave it as iOS. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to name my profile Restrict iTunes and Safari. And there's plenty of other items in here that you'll need to fill out when you're doing this. But I'll just do this quickly so you see how easy it is. Now I got a couple options here. Control when the profile can be removed, always, with authorization, or never. So if you don't want to give the ability for this end user to remove this profile, you just say never. And then if you want this profile to expire after a specific time or after a specific day, you can choose here on date or after interval. So if I want this profile to expire at the end of next week, I can specify a specific date in here. For our case, we just want to create a generic profile, so I'm going to click on Restrictions and Configure. Now in this case, I've got a list of all these devices, all these options that are checked. And by checked, it means that they are allowed. From my perspective, what I want to do is I want to uncheck some of these items. So if I want to, I'll click on Applications here, and I want to uncheck iTunes, and I want to uncheck Safari. So what I'm saying is this profile is going to not allow the use of iTunes and not allow the use of Safari. So I'm going to click OK. And what I've done is just created this Restrict iTunes and Safari profile. Now, from my perspective, if I want to apply that particular profile to all of my devices for my year 10 students, all I need to do is click and drag it over to this configuration profile. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up an iPad here, and we will do a quick list. I'll show you how this works. So right now I do have access to Safari, and I do have access to iTunes on this particular iPad. And this is my In Technology iPad 3 that you would see here in year 10. So what I'll do is I'll come back to Configuration Profiles, and I will drag this over to my Configuration Profiles section underneath the Smart Policy. And what I'm doing is I'm clicking and dragging to Configuration Profiles, and I got some options here. Now, auto-install means it's going to push this configuration profile down to the device automatically, and it's going to leave it there. On-demand means the end user is going to have the choice whether or not to implement this configuration profile. We don't want that in this case because we want to force the end user to restrict iTunes and Safari. In my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just click on auto-install, auto-remove. This means that I'm going to force the profile down, and if this device ever was unenrolled from my MDM, the profile would automatically come off. So auto install, auto remove is best practice in this case, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop it there. And the MDM is now sending out a command through my network, and I don't know if you just saw it, it happened that fast. My Safari and my iTunes icons are gone from my iPad. So that's how fast this happens. It pushes out. Now if I want to take that off for any reason, I could say, okay, I don't need that anymore. I can just right-click and remove configuration profile from policy. Alternatively, I can drag it and move it to the forbidden policy. That means this particular profile cannot apply to this device. And in my case, I'm just going to do that. I don't want it ever to apply to this device. And a little while later, 5 seconds, my iTunes and my Safari are back, and I can use them once again. So that's how easy it is to create a configuration profile and apply it to a smart policy. And just remember that smart policy can contain hundreds of devices if you need it to. So a lot of the common things we get questions for are, how do we look for or create policies for applications? Now, I'll use a good example. Now, I've got an app, a smart policy here called Banned Apps. And that's what I can do with this is I can see, give me a particular list of devices where mobile app names contain Snapchat is installed. So what I've done is I can say, okay, this particular smart policy is going to look for any device that contains Snapchat and has found my InTechnology iPad 3 again. So I can see that this particular device has Snapchat installed, but as a policy, as a school policy, I don't allow Snapchat. So I've got a couple options here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an automated action here for an email. And to create an automated action, I just right-click on Actions, New, Send Email Action. Now I've already got one created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this email, and I'm looking at an action I call Snapchat Warning. Now we can utilize variables in Absolute Manage, and that's what this looks like, MDU email, to say if a device has, what I'm saying here is if a device has Snapchat on it, I can send this action to this smart policy, and this particular email will go out to the user whose iPad this is, and will say, okay, please remove Snapchat from your device, and it will give the device name. So I created the email. To apply it to policy, I drag it down to Actions, and I click Actions, and I've got a couple of options here. I can delay the start of the action, or I can repeat the action. In my case, I just want it to run once, but keep in mind that you can have these alternating and going, maybe 3 or 4 times. I click OK. I've applied that action. So now any user with Snapchat installed is going to get an email. And the email, I'll pull one up. It looks like this. Please remove Snapchat from device InTechnology iPad 3. So that's how I got the email. Hello, Dave Wells, and I can see that I've included the mobile device policy in there. So it works that fast. So now that we've created smart policies, and I'm going to go back to my mobile devices here. We've created smart policies. We've created an action and applied an action to a smart policy. The next thing we want to talk about is apps. Now, there's a couple things that we can do here. Third-party apps can be created and referenced by right-clicking, choosing mobile applications, and then new, and we'll just talk iOS here, new iOS App Store application package. And at this point, I get a dialog box that says, what kind of app do you want to install? What's the app that I want to install? In my case, I want to deploy a really good education app because this is education focused. So I'm going to utilize something called NetOff Vision. Now, I know I've already went into the iTunes store and I've already grabbed the URL for this. So let me just pop that up. And the way this works is basically when you want to deploy an application from the App Store, all you do is you go into the particular iOS. You go into iTunes, you grab a URL, and you copy that URL into this box. So I click paste. And what this is going to do is it's going to reference, it's going to tell my MDM server where to go out and find NetOff Vision. And I click OK, and notice I have a couple options here: delete application when device is removed from MDM management, and/or prevent backup of application data. So you could prevent this data from being backed up if you wanted to. In my case, I'm going to leave things as the default. I'm going to click OK, and now I've got an app set up in here for NetOp Vision. Now, once I have that app set up here, adding it to a device is very easy. It's the same type of process. I just go down and I drag it to the smart policy that I want to drag it to. So in this case, I want to put it on, recommend this to all of my year 10 devices. And I drag it into third-party applications on demand, and I let it go. Now what that's saying is that I've now recommended this app to all of my year 10 devices. And what a student has to do to access that is they log back into their iOS device and they utilize what we call Absolute Apps. Now, Absolute Apps is an app that comes with MDM, and you can customize it on your own, and you can call it whatever you want, like your school name apps, and you can change the logo, but in our case we'll just leave it as default. They click on Absolute Apps and they access the App Store. Now in the App Store is a list of all the different apps that we recommended to them on an MDM. Now I scroll down here and I found NetOp Vision. When I want to install this, I just click Install, and you can install this app, or in this case I just click Install, and I'll be prompted for my my iTunes password in a second. So every time a student installs this, they'll get this option. The server manage.intechnology.com is about to install the app. Yep. So I click Install. I enter in my demo iTunes account, and that app is now being installed on my device. And that's what we call a managed app. And any app that we distribute through Absolute Manage MDM is a managed app, and therefore we can remove it. So we have a saying, anything we give, we can take away, and that's the case with this particular app. So now I can go back if I needed to, and I can remove this app from this particular device, or I can remove it from all the devices by removing this from the policy. Now, that was a free app. What if it's a paid app that we're trying to distribute? It's the same process. And let's just say it's a paid app, and you've gone through and you've purchased codes from Apple, and you've got a list of Apple volume purchase codes. So I've got a VPP sample here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click this button to add codes, and I'm going to navigate to where you stored your codes, and I'm going to click Open. Now what this has done is it's automatically imported for you all those Apple VPP codes that you would have downloaded from iTunes for your devices. And once I click OK, when a student redeems one of these codes, in this message here, in that option, you'll get a list of the student who's redeemed it and the date they redeemed it. So that's how we can distribute VPP, apps with VPP codes or paid apps, and we see schools doing this all the time. Now, not only can we distribute third-party applications from this, but we can also distribute books. So if I right-click here, up in my third-party applications, if I right-click and say Mobile Applications New iOS App Store Application Package, this category option, I can change that to a book. And now I can distribute iBooks that you've purchased or are free from the iTunes Store. And it's very much the same process. So if you have a code on it, for example, I've got Around the World in 80 Days. So I'll copy this. I'll copy that out and I'll paste it in. Same process that we did with the app. I can also, if you purchase this using the volume purchase codes, and with Apple they just started letting us do that a couple weeks ago, I can click OK, and now I can distribute an iBook out to my devices. So I know that a particular group needs that particular book. So I know that year 10 is reading Around the World in 80 Days. I can click and drag that down to my third-party applications on demand, and I can access that particular iBook from that same device. And if I go back to that device, I can get a list of any books that I have. Like here's an example of my Around the World in 80 Days and so forth. So it's a good way to distribute iBooks, whether they're free or paid. You can also use iAuthor and create your own iBooks and distribute it that way. Now, we've just got a few minutes left on here, and I hope you guys enjoyed those demos. I want to just duck back into the slide deck for a second, and we'll talk about onboarding policies and how this works. So we went through device enrollment. So device enters your network. The first thing you're going to want to do is have the end user enroll the device. When you enroll the device, you're going to push things down like Wi-Fi. Maybe you'll include a proxy in there. You're going to push down individual applications, etc. with that. That goes with our automatically installing device profiles. You're going to deliver secure data, so you can utilize what we call Absolute Safe to deliver out those individual files and folders to devices. Now, once that device leaves the network, you're going to want the capacity to go in and remove all that data off that device. And that's where that auto-install, auto-remove came into play. Now, anything in auto-install, auto-remove, so once that's there, all those configuration profiles will leave the particular device once they're unenrolled, and that's how we securely remove data in device profiles. So kind of talking about an MDM and choosing the right solution, there's a few things that you're going to want to look at. You're going to want to look at platform flexibility. So does it easily install within the existing environment? Consolidation, can you manage all your form factors from a single console? Administration, can you use role-based administration? So your different service desk techs can be assigned to different users. And then the types of device management, can you distribute iOS and Android apps? And can you utilize Windows and Mac OS X software packages to distribute out to your Mac and Windows devices? From a security standpoint, you really want to focus on automated remediation. So like that email. But going beyond the email, you can actually schedule an automated, you can have a device become unenrolled automatically. So, that person has Snapchat, and, if you send them an email and they don't remove it, then you can send an email to maybe a school administrator, and the student still doesn't remove it. You can schedule an unenrollment of that particular device. Also, you want something AD integrated, something that hooks into your AD, and you can start building your smart policies based around your Active Directory users. So we've got a few minutes left for questions. I hope you guys enjoyed that quick little session on some live demos on creating smart policies, enrolling mobile devices, creating a simple configuration profile. My contact information is up there, and if you have any other questions or concerns, please pop them into the question sheet now, and we can go through and answer them. So one of the questions, what happens if a student goes home, if we block a game or an app when they take it home, or they're on their own network, is it still blocked? It depends on how you want to do it. You can, for a personal device, if you have that configuration profile and those smart policies there for actions, that action, you can schedule profiles to be given from a given time, like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. for configuration profiles. Now, blocking apps is a little bit different. Now, from an iOS perspective, you can't blacklist an app. You can just suggest that a student removes it. So you're technically not blocking anything. Now, when we talk about turning off Safari as an example, so you can turn Safari off from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. because that's an iOS utility. The same thing could be said for iTunes. So we can turn iTunes off from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if they go, they leave school, they go home, they can have iTunes back. So I hope that helps answer that question. It's not only for Active Directory. This works with Open Directory as well. So it integrates with Active Directory and Open Directory. That's a good question. Yeah, how it works is whatever server you install Absolute Manage on, if that's bound to AD or OD, it will take that precedent. So if it's bound to OD, you can utilize Open Directory with it. So during the installation of the app, I noticed you had to authenticate as the end user. Is there a way for a school to retain ownership of the app without using Configurator? So the way that the process works right now with BPP, right now in iOS 6, is there, without using Configurator, there is no way for a school to retain that ownership using this method. It has to be done through Configurator. I don't know what that's going to look like going forward. I don't know if maybe at iOS 7 there's going to be an improvement in that. But rest assured, if Apple allows us to do something and they create an API, we will take advantage of that. You can push certificates to Android devices. It depends on each Android, because of the difference in platforms. The question was, can I push authentication certificates to Android devices? Due to the difference in Android platforms, you can do some things with Android devices, like Samsung as an example. Samsung has the most amount of flexibility, and you can push 802.11x authentication certificates to Android devices using on Samsung platform. There are others that you might not be able to. And in that case, we can work with you, and I can show you kind of offline all the different things you can do for different flavors of Android devices. So another question, can we remove an app such as Snapchat or stop it from being run other than a warning? Using on iOS, and this is an iOS item, you cannot stop it from being ran on the device. You can just trigger a warning and you can unenroll the student if they've installed it themselves. Now, that's the way iOS works. The way iOS is, if a student installs an app, we cannot remove it right now. Android is a different story. Like a Samsung Android, if someone installs a mobile app on a Samsung Android, any app, we can remove it, no matter whether we installed it or they installed it. Good question. So for under 13, a good question, how does the system of apps distribution work for under 13s who don't have an iTunes account? We see a lot of people a lot of schools who might create iTunes accounts or even share. I've seen people share iTunes accounts for that, and it's something that you probably want to have to decide on it as a school. Can you add a web app like bookmark homepage to Android and iOS? So a web app, we call it a web clip. In iOS, you can definitely add that to an iOS device. It's called a web clip. It's really easy to do. Android, it depends on the Android OS that you're working with. You'll have some more flexibilities. Like Samsung, you can do that, but other Android apps, it really depends. Case studies. Have we got a list of schools using now Prepare to share their experience? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we could definitely reach out to you and provide you some case studies and also some reference sites for sure. I've got another question on the cost of the system. So the really good question, the server itself, the server software itself is free, and the licensing you're paying on a per device usage, and we can definitely reach out to you and get you specific costs on the different licenses. Yeah, very good question. One of the questions we got, can you talk about handling of data files in a classroom setting? Uploading, downloading, saving files to a file server, say on an iPad. Yeah, that's a very, very good question. With the Absolute Manage MDM comes with a built-in tool called Absolute Safe that allows us to distribute apps down to the device. With that tool, we can't save apps back to the file server, but there's a really, really good tool called Mobile Echo that you can do all of that with. So from a Mobile Echo standpoint, you can load that app onto your iOS and Android devices and configure it so it uses Active Directory permissions, and students have access to the files they would normally have access to on their workstation, as an example. So it uses AD permissions, and you can grant access to Windows file servers, NAS devices, SharePoint, etc. Any more questions? Anybody wants to jump in and ask at the last minute? All right, everyone. Well, from me, thanks a lot. I really appreciate everyone's attendance today, and you have some really good questions. And I will turn it back over to our moderator for a quick close.
Thanks for joining us. You will be receiving an email that will alert you to the on-demand status of today's event so that you can review any material you missed or simply may want to go over again. On behalf of our presenters, as well as the folks at Absolute Software, my name is Gemma, and we wish a good day.